Right, we are live. It is Thursday, April 23rd, and this is a design and user experience weekly meeting or fortnightly meeting where we talk about related issues for Backdrop. I would like to spend a minute letting everybody introduce yourselves before we get started. So why don't we start with Greg?
Hi, so I'm Greg. I'm usually joining from Melbourne, Australia, but now I'm in Greece because of the coronavirus thing. It's been a while since I attended. I think I've missed 3 weeks of meetings so far. Planning to catch up and help as much as I can.
Next, let's do Tim.
I am Tim, St. Paul Tim. I am usually reporting from Minneapolis, Minnesota, but I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota. My productivity has crashed in the last week or two, so kind of just came to check in. We have mentioned maybe doing a quick update on usability studies initiative. Talk about that later.
Great, Luke.
I am Luke McCormick. I am a web marketer / occasional developer in San Ramon, California. And I like to keep abreast of how one makes Backdrop look good. And I'm particularly interested in ways that non-artist and CSS experts can manage to still present usable and professional looking sites.
Great. Let's do Joseph if you're.
I'm Joseph. I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada, and I'm just here to hear what everyone else is working on.
Sorry,
Matt would like to introduce himself. My name is Jen Lampton. I am hailing from Oakland, California, and I got a couple of interesting emails this week I would like to share. So we'll get to that in a minute. Why don't we start with the design theme user experience initiative update. So Backdrop will be adopting initiatives starting in the 1.17 release cycle, I guess. And we've asked for a bunch of proposals. We have a great one for the design theme user experience stuff. And I didn't know if Luke, you wanted to do an update in this meeting for anyone watching later or anyone who knows more about it.
Is this referencing the standard display template choice of ready to go themes world that
it
I've talked
could,
about, or something else?
let's see. So I was thinking about the forum post initiative proposal. What was it? Or maybe not. I thought I saw one specifically on design theme.
Well, there's one on just sort of more better contrib theme.
Better themes.
Possibly in core. I'm just about there. The include several ready to use themes was how Luke originally posted it. I think he was suggesting in core, and then we talked about, at least having more themes available. But that, I don't know if that's related to or not what we've talked about more recently, which is this idea of having a site to just be able to, a theme switcher site where people can try out and test themes.
I mean, they're related to the fundamental problem that I'd like us to solve. Is that somebody should be able to build a site with Backdrop that just knows nothing about how to make a website prettier. Someone that doesn't know what the word font means, someone that couldn't differentiate between Helvetica and Times if their life depended on it, somebody that has never heard of a color wheel. You should still be able to go on a site and the first thing that comes up should like not look bad. And it should not be the only thing. There has to be at least one, but preferably like a handful of like A, B, or C, which do you like? And the idea being to give somebody that just has information they want to dispel and has used websites to kind of gain vocabulary, to be able to even engage in discussions about what they want, or figure out ways to do things better themselves.
I would love it if we could find a way to adapt the current initiative proposal to include, rather than being very specific about like put themes in core, which I think could be done in an issue, to make it sort of higher level and be like, address this fundamental problem of it being hard for people who don't write code or understand design to make their site look good. And that could address more themes in core. It could address a better way for those people to choose themes. It could address more tools for allowing people to do stuff in like the basis theme or something. Like if I wanted to, I don't know, we already have upload your logo or whatever, but if you wanted to like make a modification in a way that wouldn't look terrible, not like a garland green gradient as opposed to a garland blue gradient thing, but something like that, where you can put in some, rather than make it blue, make it red or something. And we have a little bit of that with the hero image. Like we've already made it a little bit easier for people to make those kind of changes themselves. But something more high level, like how do we empower those people to do more with Backdrop? And I think if you can get a higher level initiative like that, we can address any one of those things during any given release cycle. And I think it would be a better way to solve the problem than looking on one particular solution and trying to push that forward.
Yeah. Do you want me to edit that initiative proposal to be more about the user story?
Yeah, or yes, and a more generic title, maybe too.
Yeah.
I have some thoughts. In general, I'm for adding modules or features in core to make life easier for site builders. But when it comes to themes, and I'll explain why, we are in a better position than Drupal at this moment because we have the project browser. So I would like to avoid the overhead of adding new themes in core, and I would like us to make it easier for people to choose, browse, select, install themes from the current repository, like the current collection that we have. So I see this initiative as sort of like bullet points of what could be done. I would like to have more themes support color module, color variations, because that's an easy way to customize anything and make it look different than some other sites. So if that's a concern that some people have, like, I don't want my site to look exactly like every other site. So we're doing a good job with Batik at the moment. There's a discussion around color module and using variables. It says variables, but that delves sort of like dips into themer territory, which is the opposite of what you were mentioning, Luke, that they don't have to know code necessarily. That's why I'm saying bullet points. So we can touch on multiple things. We can touch on providing more support for color for more themes. We can look, the other bullet point would be bringing the existing themes, the existing ported themes into a better shape if they have issues, and then porting more themes and adding them into Contrib so that they can be browsable from the project browser.
Yeah, no, wholeheartedly agree with that. I'm looking at the initiative proposal, and while I don't actually say include in core, I can see how that would be how that's read, and that's not what I meant. I just actually meant that from the initial thing, it'd be a button press away, like from the user's perspective. It doesn't have to already be on the disk. I don't care.
Yeah, let's work for them. That's the point. Let's work for them in order to try a theme. That's the point. And
Okay.
there's another one for the people that are actually themers and they want to grab so they find a theme that brings them sort of like 80% to where they want to be. I would like us to make it easier for them to find ways to create sub-themes and customize them for those that do a little bit of coding. In that aspect, and I think there's an issue for it, I would like us to include a sub-theme of basis in core, like an example of sub-theming in core. I don't know how that can, so like that's an idea that I have. Maybe there are reasons not to do it, and I'm happy to hear thoughts.
Yeah, I really liked when I was first learning how to theme, I really liked the starter kit that was a part of Zen. And I really liked how like well documented Zen was. I felt like it was a really great educational tool, at least at the beginning when it was fairly simple. And I would love it if we could maybe take a look at like the Drupal 6 Zen example and see if we can do something similar. I would want to make that starter kit disabled in the UI so that we wouldn't be creating UI confusion by adding a developer tool.
Yeah. So my idea was to create a sub-theme of the 7 theme and provide a dark version of it, like a dark mode version of it. But this is a good idea, but most people will be looking to sort of like sub-theme a front end, a user-facing theme instead of the admin theme. So if anyone has better ideas or use cases, but this was a request that we have seen a couple of times in Gitter saying we should support dark mode. And I think that there is a sub-theme like in Drupal land where they're sub-theming Clara, where they're creating a dark version of Clara, the new theme for D9. And I thought that was a good idea. But as I said, this initiative is mostly about people that will be using things for the consumption of their customers or site visitors instead of the admin thing. Nevertheless, if we can't find a good use case, I still would like to explore sub-theming 7.
I like that idea. I think that project could also start in Contrib. It's gonna probably need a designer to help us pick, like in the normal admin theme, we have like 8 versions of gray. We're gonna need somebody to choose those and then do an accessibility check on them for a dark version. And that could be tricky in core. I think if we had that done in Contrib first, it might move a little faster.
My motive for adding a sub-theme in core is also touches a bit on the dev experience and what we do with testing. So I would like us to be able to add tests eventually that grab potential problems with sub-theming. So we had a few issues that where sub-themes do not inherit color or support and things like that. So if we do have a sub-theme in core, which doesn't add a lot of overhead, like the dark mode as I said, then we can add tests in core
Just
so we don't break this functionality.
just an FYI, the issue to fix sub-theming with the color module got merged like a week ago.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
that's
excellent.
but fixed, and it's also much easier to set up the color module because it makes like a bunch of those weird parameters optional.
That's
Okay.
great.
Great.
Also, I think we do already have sub-theme tests in core. I just think they weren't testing the things that are broken. So I don't think adding a sub-theme, especially one that just changes colors, like a dark thing, would actually help us catch more of those. So we need to have the tests for the things that are, we don't know what's broken until they're broken, and then we can add the tests. But I don't think it would have helped in this case.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So I just want to throw in before we move on to a different topic that the closest thing I'm aware of to sort of the idea that I'm looking.
Sorry, mute. You're muted.
We
Or
lost you.
We lost you. Look,
We can
we
see
lost
you.
you. Oh, no, he stopped moving as well.
Uh-oh.
And so,
You're back.
Look,
oh,
you're
did I
back. We lost
did
you.
my network connection seems to be iffy because I keep losing you guys. I think it's my expensive and highly touted brand new Xfinity connection that was gone again.
Yeah, likely they're just charging you more for the same thing.
I'm gonna have to run some speed tests. Anyway, it looks like it's still frozen. I'll just give up.
We can hear you. We can hear you fine.
Oh, okay. Did you hear my whole thing? Was I?
No, we lost like 20 seconds of it, the last 20 seconds of it.
Yeah, we lost most of it.
I'll try again. See if this one gets through.
Although you were very animated because we could see you.
So that packet got a knack as opposed to an ack. So I'll rebroadcast it, which is that Bootswatch contains, comes with a half dozen or so, I think slightly more than that, different ways that Bootstrap can look, that some are dark, some are light, some have big fonts, some are professional, covers. I still think it's kind of a narrow game, but it's at least a startup. I think for us, by the way, since layout, we have layout manager, and that's a huge part of what makes a site look. We at some point, maybe right away, but at some point we need a similar try it functionality for layouts.
For layouts, as a preview of layouts of what,
similar to the theme test site that we don't have yet.
Yeah. That seemed, I haven't talked about that much because that seems like a substantial scope increase. So I didn't really want to talk about it, but it would be nice,
Yeah, I agree. And I think that if we can figure out the infrastructure necessary for the theme test driver, we could use that for modules and layouts and whatever else we need. So there's kind of one underlying large problem. And then once we get that done.
Yeah.
There's a sort of like half-baked idea, which already has an early ticket, like I think in the 3-digit range, about providing better previews of the blocks being added in layouts, as in when people are adding blocks, sometimes in some cases certain blocks have the same name. So if a person adds various menus, they see menu block, they don't have any idea what it is, things like that. I'm just making examples now. So there's at least one issue where we say that we should provide some context on sort of like some preview of what the block would look like. These are things that sort of like provide a sort of like a preview so that the person has a better idea of what it is that they will get.
Yeah, so Panels did this too, the same use case where they're going to have a bunch of people placing blocks who maybe aren't super familiar with all of the machine names of views or whatever it is that shows up, to render the output and put it in the description area so that when you're looking at it, you get like a little tiny snapshot of like what's going to be in there. But some of the problems that came up with that is that the admin theme really makes it not recognizable for people a lot of times when you're like, oh, this doesn't look anything like my menu on the front end of the site. Is it broken? And then people get like really concerned. Like it almost turns them off if it's almost what they want, but not what they want. There's a disconnect between like, oh, I'm placing boxes that represent the thing versus, oh, I'm placing the thing. I don't know how to solve that problem. It's surely possible, but I think we would need to involve some design help. I think though there are more things we can do about like making not all the text on all the blocks the same. That's definitely a clear starting point. But in terms of rendering it, we'll need some help from the design side to somehow be like, this is a like sample content, not a preview, like some kind of terminology that makes it clear that it's not going to look the same.
Yeah, it's a hard problem to solve. I remember that at some point I brought it up early on that we could be using sort of like, I'm just going to use terminology that is not exactly what I want to mention. It's like sort of like an iframe inside the admin theme in the layout builder, where we sort of like have the front end theme being represented in the block sort of like placement section. But then that brings the issues like there's certain admin interface controls, like the drag controls, that might not be represented in the front end theme. or thought of, and it might seem broken, or as you said, then the user will not be getting exactly what they will be seeing. And as I said, I don't have a solution to that. It's just that thoughts and ideas of how to make it a bit easier for people to understand what they're doing or what they will get with what they're doing.
I wonder if there's a way we could work on this in Contrib with a module that would modify the contents of like each block when viewed in an administrative context and play around with it a little bit. We could start there. We could also go as far, Gregory, as what you just recommended, where like have a module that modifies in the layout context what the layout render says. And I think I don't know how much it like. I think by default
It will break things.
But I
we,
know for me personally, I often remove contextual links on blocks when I find them more confusing than helpful. I'll just go into the template and like rip out the prefix and suffix around the title to make the link go away. So I would be deliberately breaking both the front end and back end interface by doing that.
It was basically Luke's comments that sort of like made me think of this concept of combined thoughts in my head and think of, we do have a preview in the theme settings for the color module, which works really great. Like people actually see it can browse the site with what the colors they configure. And I know that it's like a big task, and it's like I haven't even thought through on how we could achieve that, but it would be amazing if we could do something similar with layouts. Like
I think we could have a preview button on the layout that would like on the whole layout that would take you to a page that would preview, but I don't think we could do like render a block
So
as a preview.
yeah,
the front end and the back end of your layout are both rendered with a layout renderer. And it's just like we have the front end layout renderer, which just displays your content, and the back end one, which displays the UI. Could we make a new one as sort of a port of the in-place editor from panels in Drupal 7 and have sort of like render your front end, but then have like lines around where your regions are, so you can do drag and drop stuff on your front end theme?
Yeah, I think that is 100% possible because the architecture that we have now was based off of the fact that panels did that. So it should be easy to create an in-place editor for Backdrop in the same way, like maybe even using the same code that was in panels. Refactored, but theoretically possible. Not
exactly. It's an idea, and in theory it should work in my head, but I've never touched that bit of the code. I know there's a lot of object-oriented magic happening there, and it's not my strongest thing. So I don't know how it would help.
Something once, I don't remember, maybe Gregory, you can, where we were talking about opening the administrative settings for a block in the front end theme. So it's like the opposite of what we're talking about now, where we're opening, like rendering the front end of the block in the back. This was rendering the back end of the block in the front. It might be useful to look at that pull request.
So it was, if we're talking about the same thing, was the confusion was that when people are in the front end, there's a contextual link that allows them to edit the block, but that leads them to the back end, and then they say, what am I editing now? So the effort was to sort of like allow editing the block in place, like having that dialog pop up with the front end theme. Anyways, I haven't visited that, but it was along those lines. It wasn't exactly, you know. But yeah, that was one of the things that if we start implementing those tiny things, we will make it better or easier for people to work with things. And
but also much easier for them to hurt themselves, which is why that didn't get in.
Yeah.
So
I remember that Doc Wilmot, as always, trying to tackle the hardest things, started working on that, and the roadblock was something along those lines, but that we would make it confusing, or anyways, we hit some other problem. I can't
Yeah.
recall.
So if you have the same block on 2 pages and you edit it on 1 page and you look at the other page and you're like, why is it different? And then you edit on the other page, you go back to the first page and you're like, that's funny. Now it's different over here. Like people aren't going to
Yeah.
understand that that block is placed in multiple places. I'm not sure that's explained any better on the back end. There's just sort of a different level of assumption of who is working with a layout back end than
Yes,
who is
exactly.
working with the layout on the front end. And that could also be split by like permissions.
Yeah.
Where if you don't have permission to like administer layouts, you don't get the opportunity to edit the block on the front end or something. But yeah, I think people are just gonna be like, oh, that's stupid. Why do I need that? And then check the box and then still be confused. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we could try it, we
Yeah,
could
we'll-
test it.
Yes. And then you do user
Then-
studies so we can see if it's working or not.
I'm working on a couple of backdrop sites with a lady who has a lot of experience with WordPress, and she has had a really hard time with like, why is this setting on my theme and that setting on my layout, and why when I put a block with my social media links in my footer does it not show up on all of my pages?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a fundamental problem that comes from the fact that both Drupal, at least until version 7, and now I think that theme and layout is a single thing, is considered theming. Whereas in Backdrop, we sort of like split that notion into 2 separate things. And we made it, or the idea is to make it so that the theme can be changed. Theme means colors, roughly, colors, fonts, and graphics, I guess. And layout is a totally separate thing. And the idea there is that if you switch themes, you won't break your site, the structure of your site.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, for site builders is a big plus. I think that we're heading in the right direction. But I understand what you're saying, that people coming from other CMS.
Is even more extreme the other direction, where they include like module-like behavior in a theme. Like you can get a commerce theme,
Yep.
and it turns a normal WordPress site into a commerce site. So I think like, you know, it's going to be hard for us because we're trying to appeal to those people to clearly represent the separation of what is a module, what is a theme, what is the layout. At least only trying to do it only visually in the UI is really hard.
I always thought that.
Go ahead.
I always thought that WordPress was a sort of like an entry-level CMS where people start, and that notion that you just explained, Jen, sort of like makes it easier for them to grasp the whole ideas and the concepts. But once they start learning more and getting more professional, may I say that, they sort of like, or advanced, I would say, more ambitious. Then they start exploring different ways to make more structured data and content, and that's when they sort of like think of moving into CMSs like Drupal and Backdrop. So I don't think that we will ever appeal to the audience that is not yet in that point in their sort of like learning experience where they're ready to sort of like go to more structured.
But I do think like there are some things we can do like that. I have to place the block in the footer on every layout. It's super annoying for everyone. That's not a
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot we can do to improve that experience. I just think we're not going to get the same end goal with, you know, all of the configurations in the theme that people expect to be there.
What if there was an option to say that a particular region should be copied from that region in another layout?
Yeah.
Like when you make
I think there's a pull request for that.
Yeah, there's an issue at least. Are you talking about the block templates or whatever we said that they would inheritance of blocks and things? Are you talking about that, Sasha?
Maybe.
Just so
Yeah,
like the
actually read
footer
that
could
issue.
say copy from default, and then all of your layouts would have a footer that's like copy from default, and then you wouldn't have to manage more than one.
Yeah, because sometimes people put 2 or 3 blocks in a specific region, like the footer has an example of that, and they have to repeat that in every sort of like layout that they create. And the idea was that we create a template or whatever we call that of blocks that then you can reuse across all layouts.
I think we might even want to go farther than that. And this is
What?
like, we don't have region settings right now. I think maybe we have like a CSS class or something, but that's it. But make it like a region setting that disables the placement of blocks and instead says this region is copying from default. And even if the starting point was like, you don't get to choose which other template you copy from, it just copies from default. I think that would be a huge step forward. It would cover 99% of use cases, probably. I
You
don't
would
know.
get
Fine anyway.
you would get into problems when the people would like to say a region one in the default, whatever we call the default layout, has 3 blocks in the footer, and they want to create a another layout which has either 2 of those blocks or all 3 plus another one. If you
Well, then they'll
stop
have to
them from
override
being
it.
able,
I still
Yeah.
feel like that's a like, if they have to deal with the world that everybody has to deal with now and everybody else gets to deal with a better world, that's still a win. So,
yes, yeah, exactly. I agree. Okay, yeah, I agree.
yeah, there are plenty of use cases where that is not perfect, but I still think it will be a huge improvement. Did you happen to
Back
pull
to-
up that issue?
Sorry.
You happen to pull up that issue?
Yeah, I'll have to do my magic again. Just let me find it.
That's one I think would be like a huge user experience improvement. I'm just gonna add that to our list here.
I recall that there were 2 similar of those issues. One of them was to be able to reuse entire regions, as in which blocks they contain, and one of them was to copy the configuration of blocks, something like that. So I'll try to
Yeah.
find it. I'll
It
try
was
to
like,
find those 2 issues.
I think Doc Wilmot wrote a contrib module that provided a block, and the block settings were copy a region from another theme or something like that, or
Yeah.
a region from another
Yeah.
layout. So I think there's already a solution for that now, a non-core solution, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tie this to the usability study, and that I think in both of the usability studies I ran, that the users were confounded by the placing a block and then having it show up on other pages, right? They put it on the home page and then didn't understand why it wasn't on other pages. So
So I think that the issue is I recall that there might be 2 of them, but I found one of them, issue 1886, so 1886. It says allow regions and blocks with theme to be reused, copy region. I think that was the one. And then there's one, if there is any related, I'm sure that we will be mentioning it in that ticket as well. So I'm scrolling through it to find
What was the number again?
1886.
Thank you for finding that.
And there's another one, reusable visibility condition templates. That's 1942.
I'll need to read both of those because I don't understand the difference right now, but thank you for digging those up. Okay, we've kind of gotten a little off track with the design theme user experience initiative update, but I think we hit on a bunch of important issues we need to be working on anyway. So I think that was a valuable conversation. But is there anything else we want to talk about specifically for the initiative, or anything that we think would help Luke update that forum post to make it more compelling? I know we've got a couple weeks before we're going to vote on it, but.
Yeah, so there is one sort of like matter or subject, I should say, that touches on or would help that, and it is sort of most of an outreach, and it has brought up many times. What can we do to attract more people to contribute into actually creating contrib themes that then people can browse and try? Maybe we should leave that discussion for the actual meeting next week, but I just wanted to mention it because we should accommodate in core making that task easier, but without a rather sort of like a big amount of things that people can try, then we're not going anywhere.
Well, the way I would phrase the initiative is that the initiative should be about making more readily available themes available. And the solution to that is going to be multifaceted, and one of them is going to be encouraging developers to make them, right? It's not going to be a purely technical solution, I don't think. It's going to be also sort of a community or a outreach issue of getting people involved in the contrib space, figuring out why that's not happening, because there's so little activity there.
I would say that
We
it
can
could
set-
even be higher level than that, because I don't think getting more themes is the only answer. I would love to see, you know, more customizable themes, or more like an easier way for people to choose like all of better ways for like all of that stuff could be incorporated into something that isn't just about how to get more themes. And maybe it's all related. I don't know. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
this is a chicken and egg thing.
Yeah, we could have a low hanging fruit sort of initiative that is port the 3 most popular themes in Drupal, or the 5 or the 10. So by low hanging fruit is just adjust that number to something that is realistic, and that people that are active in the community can do it.
I still think like porting more themes isn't necessarily the answer if they're not gonna be good. Like, just
No, no,
because they're
porting
popular
is-
in Drupal 7 doesn't mean they're gonna be like, you
No, no.
know, popular Drupal 7 themes probably are adding layout solutions that people don't have. And if there isn't like the same like design win as you get when you try on a WordPress theme, it's maybe not gonna be as compelling.
Yeah.
So-
When I said porting, I meant in a way that is like they're reusable, they have color support so that people can tweak them in a way that they're useful in Backdrop land. That's what I meant.
I would also recommend like looking at the themes we already have and spending time on the ones that we know people are using and maintaining. And I think we do have a handful of top themes already, or at least we have a handful of themes that Andy ported a long time ago that haven't gotten attention since like layout changes and stuff. It might be revisiting those.
So team made an effort as well. Didn't you start doing some work? I remember the outcome of that work being a few issues that you raised team in the queue about blockers, about certain things that would make your life as a teamer more difficult. And then I'm not sure where we are at with that. I recall the full width sections and the gaps that were between them, things like that. And all this work came from your work trying to push or create a new theme, right?
Yes and no. It actually came from trying to figure out what you could do to make your site look better just using Basis, finding problems, and then creating a new theme that fixed those problems, but hopefully backporting those into Basis. So the goal was to, like, I should be able to configure a good looking site with Basis, and there, you know, I identified some bugs there. So that could be a part of all this. I mean, I think if we want a sort of a practical outcome of this discussion, it would be trying to get closer to what the scope of this would be, because I'm hearing, you know, like Gregory putting forward a really measurable, simple, straightforward goal, maybe not phrased perfectly, but so maybe it's not port 3 themes, but it's like, make sure that there are, you know, we have X number of attractive, easy to use themes, whether they're ported, new, we don't care where they came from. That would be a really specific goal. And then I'm hearing Jen say, oh, but there's so many surrounding issues. This should be much more meta. And
Right. Well, it's just about, are we making an issue or are we making an initiative? Right. So if we're going to create an issue in the queue, it could be like, we need themes, and that's something that we could actually do. Like, it's a tangible, like, check in the box. Yes, it's done. But an initiative is like, what do we want to fix about Backdrop? Not an issue, but like, what is the big problem that needs to be solved? And I think we hit on that exactly.
Well, that's what,
I want to take it even meta than Jen's meta, I think, because there's even just the language. I mean, and we spit back and forth, you know, themes a lot, you know, knowing what we're talking about. But as we've already talked about in this discussion, what WordPress people say when they mean themes actually is substantially different from that, and we have to communicate with them. And I would suggest that even that doesn't really cover it. That like general population has an even larger range of things that they don't know. So we want to, at the same time, even though out of that larger thing, probably 75% of that functionality actually is in themes. So we don't want to like forget that. I mean, that's the low hanging fruit. That's where we want to get the most bang for the buck on the outside. But if we ignore that 25%, we actually end up closing very little of the gap. We need to somehow address that other stuff. If nothing else, maybe it's a documentation thing. Maybe it's, as you're choosing themes, like a little thing that says, oh, by the way, you'll also want to do layouts and modules and color module, or whatever. Like we need to understand that the words we say may only be a subset of what somebody thinks we're talking about. And so I'll try to boil some of that into the initiative without forcing a scope creep. We still want to be able to do attainable things.
And I would like to mention something that is related to that. Just food for thought. I was looking at the user stats the other day, and I have not, like, we are close to 1,200 sites now, and although all these things that we discussed today come up every now and then, I haven't seen anyone complaining. So it's my idea that people are either reusing or sub-theming basis, or they're building custom themes so far. So the target audience, or at least the people that have adopted Backdrop, maybe do not need all of that, which is not to sidetrack this discussion. It's the discussion of how do we bring the rest of the people who are looking for those features. I just wanted to bring it up. That's my point. That all these
that's the whole point. The whole point is are we satisfying the people who have been satisfied, and how much of an echo chamber are we in?
Exactly.
I think part of that might be because so in Drupal, it was very common for people to just make their own themes. And like, I'm not sure I really ever heard of anybody using a theme they downloaded from Drupal.org. So it could be that just because the people we are attracting are former Drupal people, that's why no one's really tried to ask for custom theme or contributed themes before.
Oh yeah, no, I'm totally proposing solving a problem that Drupal did not manage to solve. like that's core. But there's lots of stuff in Backdrop like that. Right?
To answer what you just, go ahead then.
So I was just going to say that last week or last design meeting, Gregory, I don't think you were here, but Luke brought up this amazing point that I hadn't even thought of, is that we could do more with a style guide and provide some like base things in there that we expect every theme to support, and things just like a view of teasers, that we don't have like a concrete list of like things that people who's making a theme need to have it look good with. Right. And if all of that stuff was in our style guide, and we said, if you're going to contribute a theme, put on the style guide, make sure everything in the style guide looks good, we would probably get from things that look like good in a screenshot, terrible on your site because you've built views or something, to something that would look a lot better. Because most of what makes Drupal so hard to get a good theme for is all of the customizations, which sort of requires that everybody make a custom theme. And so it's just sort of this world of like, everything is too custom. There's no way we can make one theme that's going to work well on every site. But if we start providing better baselines, then I think that more people will be able to build sites using those baselines. And I just wanted to bring that up because you weren't here when we first talked about that. And it just kind of like blew my mind, like, why don't we do that? We should, here's a teaser view, here's a list view, here's whatever, and just let people provide some basic styles for how to render those.
When you're talking, just a question, when you were talking, mentioning style guide, are you referring to the style guide, the document that we have in place for us, or the style guide, the module?
The module.
Okay, I think we also have a ticket in the queue which says that we should have that as part of core, as in providing a tab, I guess, in its theme configuration that provides a style guide so that people can see what has been themed and what has not. I think we already have an existing issue for that. I'll try to dig it up.
We were talking about that too a couple weeks ago, but just the fact that it's so incomplete now,
Yes.
I think we need to do some work on it to make it into the thing we want it to be, and then it would be a really easy win to be like, put it in core, everyone should do this.
Yeah, because that is a tool that themers use, like, or they should use, sort of like as a guide. That's why it's called a style guide. Besides, so to make sure that they sort of like themed properly every aspect. But back to what Joseph said, Joseph, to answer your question, I think that if we take the, I don't know, again, I'm going to throw a random number, 3 or 5 most popular modules being used in Drupal.org and look at the usage stats. Like if we see 50,000 sites using a single theme, then that tells us something. And I understand that we have things like Bootstrap and Omega, which are not actual themes. But if we find actual things that are not starter kits or sub themes of something else, then that should tell us something. So if we see there's roughly 1 million sites built on Drupal. Drupal 7 should be like 700K and Drupal 8 around 300K. So if you see that there's like the most popular theme in Drupal has only like 3,000 usage, then they have the same, I wouldn't say problem, they're in the same situation as that. That there's only a few people that are actually using ready-made themes.
Right. Well, yes. My point was that like maybe the reason no one's complained is because they're used to that in Drupal.
Oh yeah, as in building their own theme instead of using something ready. Yeah, you're right.
I totally think that's it. I mean, I experienced coming into Drupal in version 6. And my assumption was that I wouldn't have to build a custom theme. Like I got forced kicking and screaming into that. Like I tried all sorts of things, and you know, you're like, the most popular theme is Zen. So all right, let's see what Zen looks like. Oh my God, it looks like total crap. Like there was no answer that worked.
There's not. Can I talk for a minute?
Yeah, sure.
I feel like I haven't been able to talk for about 20 minutes. First, I mean, forget about what I was trying to say before, but on this issue, we don't get a lot of demand for this because a lot of the people that are acting in Backdrop make their own themes, and that's the way they do it, right? There is demand for pre-made themes, right? I don't maintain any sites that I built that use pre-finished themes in Drupal 7. I maintain 2 sites, at least 2 sites that were built by someone else with themes that they didn't do any, you know, it's out of the box Drupal 7 themes. There are a lot of sites like that out there. There are people coming to Backdrop and trying to build sites and being frustrated by that and leaving, but they're not sort of sticking around it. The people who stick around are the people like us who want to build our own themes. And so we don't need those other themes. Like all of my experimentation around creating these other themes are not under the vision that I would ever use them, right? I don't personally plan to build sites because I tend to create my own custom themes or sub themes. But I think there are people, and I'm talking to, I've been doing this little class for the last couple of weeks with a couple of sort of site builders that they just want an out of the box theme. They just want to be able to pick a simple theme and have it work. And there isn't, and they're frustrated by what's available. But they're not coming to the issue queue, and they're not coming to Zulip and complaining.
Oh yeah, no, of course not.
Yep.
For what it's worth, this is not just within Backdrop, not with Drupal, not even with just web. Like this is a computer industry problem. Like
Yeah.
if you look at all the stuff that people do with computers, web browsers, and TikTok and all these things were use interfaces that were built in like the last 5 or 10 years. Except for programmers programmers largely use VI are doing things in exactly the same way that people were doing 50 years ago. Like there's nothing else that people were doing 50 years ago that they still do the same way, except for coding. And that's because of precisely this problem. Like the people that write code are the people that manage to make it work for them. And they don't see it as a really compelling need to fix that. The people who do see it as a compelling need can't do anything about it and, you know, choose a different career.
Sure, but the point that I was trying to make, and I shared a link basically with all of you in the chat, which is the stock search page for themes in Drupal, and listing everything sorted by the most popular, the most installed. So if you scroll through that, you'll see Bootstrap, you'll see Adminimal, which is an admin theme, you'll see Zen, Omega, Adaptive Theme, Barrio, which I think is also a started sort of like Git, Tao, and then you reach a theme like Corporate Clean, which is not a sub theme. So this is the themes that I was referring to. So obviously a lot of people are using Corporate Clean, and then you see Shiny, Burbank, and these are also generic or static themes, and Zerb as well. But then you hit Dunlad. This is another sort of like unique theme that people seem to be using a lot. And right after that, there's one called Business. Again, a theme that is not a sub-theme or something. So this is the themes that I was referring to as the most popular, and we should make sure that these sort of like have an equivalent. I haven't looked at the code. Maybe it's horrible and we shouldn't port them in the first place. But if they are decent enough, and we bring them to Backdrop, there you go. You have 3 of the most popular themes in Drupal, like in some form being in Backdrop as well. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Marinelli is another one. Marinelli, yeah, I've seen that before.
Okay, well, we are running into dev meeting time, but I just wanted to thank you guys all for the insight. Again, as usual, I really enjoyed today's conversation and I'm looking forward to working on this initiative. I hope it gets selected.
Let me try to make it better. So increase our odds.
Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap this meeting and we'll be back for design. Matthias, I know you just joined, you're probably here for the weekly meeting, but I'm gonna kick everyone off just so that we're sure this YouTube video gets properly uploaded. So you'll have to rejoin. Sorry about that. All right, bye everybody. Maybe see you again.
Thanks.